The practice seeks to make change, but the process demands originality. The practice is consistent, but only in intention, not execution. Seth Godin from The Practice. Great quote. Excellent book, by the way. Definitely check it out. So hi, my name is Richard Soriano. I'm a front-end developer, and today I'll be demoing my GraphQL project / Node project, Missing Persons. So I wanted to just give a demo of it. I wanted to talk about the mutations and refactoring and give a few professional tips. So I developed this simple example of missing persons message board so that way, if there's a disaster, a guardian can post about missing person, and then a witness can post a message saying, hey, I found that missing person in this city. So I thought that was helpful. And usually now that I'm thinking about software, I like to think about, well, how can I help other people? So let's give a demo of it. So again, to start, npm start, and here we go. So in the previous video, I did a bunch of queries. So let's run this query, missing persons, which is also tied to guardians. So again, here's the missing persons. We have a bunch of them. Now what I'm going to do is demo some of the mutations. So the CRUD operations, as is often referred to, where you have create, update, and delete. Here we have the create. So I'm going to do Frodo with the 10 fingers. So here's my data, and I'm going to return on the right side the first name, last name, ID, and city. And that comes from so the way I like to think about it is left side is client, right side is the server. So let's create it. And voila, I created it. Let me grab this ID. When I run missing persons, I should see Frodo with the 10 fingers. And there you are. So I also want to point out that rather than passing like several arguments, you're just passing one argument, which is the data object. So that is going to help in scalability. And then let's grab this ID and paste it in there. And I'm going to do an update. Usually I do a tab on with different mutations, but I'm sort of running out of real estate. So I'm going to update it with Frodo with the 9 fingers. Let's get rid of that. Let's return Frodo. So Frodo now has 9 fingers. And again, you can check. And if you run this again, remember to run it again, because sometimes I run it and then I forget to run it. And then it's like, oh, well, where is it? So Frodo with the 9 fingers, here we are. And I also want to point out that there is data validation. So if you type last name and then you type in a number, it throws an error, expected string. And then you can even try like a Boolean. Let's say you found a missing persons and you want to update it. It says found Boolean. So there is some data type validation, and we can go more into that later. So, oh, and then the last one is obviously delete. So let's delete this guy. So all you need to do with the delete is you pass in the ID. So here's just ID, and then you return the first name. So if you deleted, Frodo with the 9 fingers is deleted. How do you know? If you run it again, it'll say not found. So you know that it's working. I mean, even if you went into the query, you run it again, you're going, oh, Frodo is not found. Uh-oh. Oh, maybe that's a good thing. So with let's do something more complicated called messages. So here messages is related to witness and missing persons. Again, let's go back to the relationships again. So this is really key when you're doing data. You want to think about, well, how is data related? So if you have guardian, is related to missing persons through this field, and then witness can create a message, and so you have messages, and it's tied to messages, and then message is also tied to missing persons. So you can see, actually, this should be required with an exclamation point, which indicates that it's required. So those are really important. Let's go back. And okay, so messages, you run it, returns an array of JSON objects. Then if you go and we will create a message, we're going to say, great movie. Again, we're passing one object rather than several arguments. You run it, hello there, body type. And then you have great movie. And then the same with an update. Pass that in there. You run that and it says goodbye there. So you can run your query, and you can see, okay, goodbye there. And it's by the faceless man about the missing person, John Snow. And obviously, you can run the delete. Oh, well, that's my update. Sorry. Let's do the delete. Delete. Goodbye there. So if you run this, the query, you'll see that there are no more data records in there. Again, this is just a flat database. It's just a text file. It's sitting in the memory. It's all there if I restart the server. So, yeah, and so when you're doing these CRUD operations, it's important to focus on the relationship, because when you start manipulating some of the records that are related to each other, you want to, let's say you create missing person. And let's see, if you create a missing person, you need the guardian's ID. So you have to ask yourself, does guardian exist? And then the same thing with message. If you delete this missing person, should I delete the message and the witness? So those are things that I always considered. And for me, I always like to keep data integrity. So things that are related to each other, try to remove them. So let's jump into the code. And I've checked this into my GitHub page, GitHub page. And let's see. So I have missing persons, and you can see I have one of the branches, which is missing persons. So let's jump into the code here. So I always like to think in very simple terms. So the mutations is very much like query. So mutations is like query, and it's made out of type defs and resolvers. So type defs and resolvers. So if you look in here, here are my type defs, schema.graphql. Okay, and then if you look above, here are my queries. And then the mutations are also in here. The resolvers are in here. And in this folder now, resolvers. So before I had one file, they used to all sit in my index, but you can see how much cleaner it is now. So in the GraphQL server, I'm just passing the file type defs, and the resolvers are already defined from the resolvers here. So yeah, and then in resolvers, you can see how I place like the mutations now sit in the object mutation, which I exported. Let's see, readability. So I always think readability. So like when you create your type defs, I like to keep like with like so that right now you have all the creates with each other, the deletes with each other, and I group the updates with each other. Now, like when you create a guardian, I have this object create guardian input, and it's a custom type, which I have down below. And you can, for updates, I always like to say update witness input, and it's a type input. So if you're going to update witness, you just pass it like that, and it's going to be so much more cleaner. And then that way you can scale it. You can add more fields like, found Boolean of type Boolean, right? So that way you don't have to redo. Oops. You don't have to redo your whole thing. You don't have to redo this whole function again. It's already defined in there. And also, if you look at the create types, you can see that the fields are required in their type defs. So, and then let's jump into the mutations for a second. So with the mutations, again, the pattern here is that the mutation functions operate the same thing as the query, where you pass in the same parameters. Parent args context info. Parent args contact info. And then DB is what I am pulling out of context. And you can see for each function, I'm passing that. So those are important. Okay, so let's get down to this mutation. And what I like to think about is data validation and data integrity. So data validation or data integrity. So let's see. So I'm using type of, and so you're saying, and as I demonstrated before, is this a string or not? So I wanted to make sure that it's a string by using type of, and then if it is, then returning it, okay? And with number, you can see that it's a number and many of the scalar types. And then integrity. So like when you're going to update a missing person, you want to make sure that the person actually exists. So what you do is you do find and see if that person exists. Otherwise, you throw an error. Okay, but I will say that like Guardian, if you're going to do Guardian and you say, okay, is this email, does this exist in it already? This is email already exists. That's not the best practice. Why? Because a lot of people fish, oh, is this email exist? Does that email exist? So you want to make sure you don't throw an error saying, hey, the email already exists. Just keep hacking until you find out the password. So definitely not the best practice. Second thing that I'm using is the spread operator in here. Again, so when you're copying objects, you don't have to go and copy every single field. Basically, you can just like, if you're going to copy every single field, you'd have to put like data the first name, and then last name. You just say, spread them out, give them all to me, and you can use them all. And then the ID, it's a random number generator, the UUID, which is just terrific. Oh yeah, and so here's a trick that I learned. So you have these array functions, sum and find, and you're like, okay, well, which one do I know? Which one should I use? Should I use sum or find? Does this evaluate true or false, or does this return an object or not? And so the way I like to think about it is sum returns a truth, is truthy, and then find returns an object. So like find, you go you place a mobile order at Chipotle, and then at the mobile order you say, find me my lunch. This is my lunch. Here's my ID. You go, oh, so they will actually go and find it, and then they will return to you the object. They will actually return your lunch. So I like that way I know, oh, it's an object. And then some, as long as one of these are true, it's good enough. So I like to think of some in Home Depot. So it's like they look at your receipt, they look at your bag, you go, if one of these evaluates true, that it exists in your bag, then you're free to go. And then so that way it returns the truth, which obviously is just one of these evaluates true. And then you can go through. And that's the way I remember it. So you pass the callback function, and if it returns true, at least one of them, then it continues. So that's the way I like to think about them. And let's see, throw an error. So last thing I wanted to cover was this throw error. So every time you use throw, you can it creates an error, it throws an object error. So here I create new error and I pass the message. And as you can see, it is an object where you can pass the message through it. Another way you could throw it is you could say throw 500, and it will throw you 500 because there's an internal error. You can also pass, DB error. You can also pass the message that way. And then as you use a data object like MongoDB or Prisma, you could just say try and catch. So that's also very popular, and I like that too. All right. Well, thank you again for watching, and have a great day.